All right, so our test is tomorrow. All the sections that are on the review is what's going to be on the test. So you won't have any completing the square questions. We'll start with the quadratic formula. So what's our quadratic formula? Negative b, what comes next? Plus or minus the square root. Awesome. So you guys have to remember that for your test tomorrow. So that's our quadratic formula. When it says solve with the quadratic formula, you have to solve it plugging into the formula. So for number 1, what's our A, B, and C? What's A?
2.
A is 2. What's B?
2.
B is -2. And what's C? 3. So we plug everything in. So we have a -2 plus or minus the square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3 over 2a. So 2 times 2. Next, we simplify. So just simplify from left to right on the top. So what does this -2 turn into? A +2, so a +2. Plus or minus the square root of, what's -2 squared? 4. Remember, it's +4 because -2 times -2, negative times a negative is positive. So a few people made that mistake on their quiz where they kept it a -4, but it becomes positive. Then what's 4 times 2? -8. And -8 times 3? -24. Over 2 times 2? 4. And then the last thing we do is simplify the inside here. So we have 2 plus or minus the square root of, what's 4 minus 24? -20 over 4. And then from here, we now know how to simplify this. We learned that in 4.8, simplifying radicals. So we have to simplify our radical. So if I had the square root of -20, what should I do first? Take the negative out and make it an I. What are 2 factors of 20? 4 and 5. And 2 factors of 4? 2 and 2. So what comes outside? A 2. So it'll be 2i square root 5. So we just take this, bless you, and replace the square root -20 because now we know how to simplify. So our answer is 2 plus or minus 2i square root 5 over 4. You always have to check and see if you can simplify what's under the radical here because now we know how to simplify that. All right, let's do number 3. What's A? What's B? And what's C? Perfect. So A, B, C. Plug everything in. So we have -b plus or minus the square root of b squared. So 2 squared minus 4 times A times C over 2A. Yes. So simplify. We have -2 plus or minus, what's 2 squared? 4. And then what is -4 times 3? And -12 times 3? -36. Over 2 times 3? 6. And then we want to simplify under the square root here. So what's 4 minus 36? Positive or negative? -32 over 6. And then we want to check and see if we can simplify our radical. So I have the square root of -32. What do I do first? Change the negative to an I. What are factors of 32? 8 and 4. And factors of 8? 2 and 4. And factors of 4? And factors of 4? So I have 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. What do I circle? 2 pairs of 2's. So what comes to the outside? 2 2's. So I have 2 times 2, I. And what stays on the inside? A 2. And then what's the last thing I got to do with these? Multiply everything on the outside together. So this becomes 4i square root 2. So we just take this and replace our radical with that. So this would be negative 2 plus or minus 4i square root 2 over 6. 5 says find the discriminant and determine the number of real solutions. So how do we find the discriminant? B squared minus 4ac. So again, we have to find our a, b, and c. But just like before, we need it to be equal to 0 before we do that. So for number 5, what do I have to do first? Minus 4n. And then how would I rewrite this? What goes first?
Minus 4n squared minus 4n minus 5.
Perfect. So it has to be in order. Remember, it has to be the n squared, then the n, then the number. So what's A? What's B? And what's C? Perfect. Now we plug it in. So I have negative 4 squared minus 4 times A times C. What is negative 4 squared? 16. What is negative 4 times negative 4? 16. And then 16 times negative 5. Remember, if we don't know, we can write it out on the side. So 16 times 5. So 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 3 would be 8. So it'll be negative 80. What's 16 minus 80? Positive or negative? Negative 64. And then this is our discriminant. How many solutions do we have?
No real solution.
No real solutions. So remember, you have to find the discriminant and the number of solutions. So some people on the quiz forgot to find the discriminant or they forgot to state the number of solutions. So don't forget, I need both things for the answer. All right, Tessa. Number 2, what's A? A is 1. What's B? And what's C? Perfect. So it's equal to 0. We don't have to move anything around. We can just say our A, B, and C. Now we plug it in. So it's negative B plus or minus the square root of, what comes next? 2 squared. Minus,
4
times,
1
times, negative 5, over, what goes on the bottom?
2 times 1.
2 times 1. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root of, what's 2 squared? 4. And then we have negative 4 times 1 and negative 4 times negative 5. Negative 20 over 2. Next, we have 4 minus 20. So it'll be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of. What's 4 minus 20?
16.
Negative 16 over 2. It should be positive 20. Good catch. So this should be a, what's 4 plus 20? 24. Now we need to check and see if we can simplify the square root of 24. So I'm going to do that over here. The square root of 24. What are 2 factors of 24? 6 and 4. What are 2 factors of 6? 3 and 2. And 2 factors of 4? So what do I circle? Circle 2's. So 2 2's. What comes to the outside? 2. What stays on the inside? 3 times 2, which is 6. So then I have negative 2 plus or minus 2 square root 6 over 2. Also, I just wanted to point out, since this was like a frequent mistake on the quiz, it's the entire thing on the top that's divided by the number on the bottom. So a lot of people just had like the square root divided by 2, but it's the whole thing on top that's divided by 2. So don't forget. I didn't take points off on the quiz, but I will on the test. So it's the whole thing that's divided by 2. You can't just divide one part of it. So we're going to do the even ones together. So for your test tomorrow, you have to know the quadratic formula. What's the quadratic formula? Over 2a. So this is our quadratic formula. You have to know it for tomorrow. Remember, it has to be equal to 0, and then you just list your a, b, and c. So for number 2, what's a? A is 1. What's b? And what's c? -5. And then we just plug everything in. So you have negative. Right, has to be equal to 0. So we have -2, because we make it a negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 1 times -5 over 2 times a, which is 1. Now we just simplify going from left to right. So -2 plus or minus. When you're doing all the math on the inside, you still have to follow your order of operations. So we want to do 2 squared first, and then we'll multiply all this together and then take our 2 answers and subtract them. So what's 2 squared? 4. And then here we have -4 times 1, -4, and -4 times -5. So this is positive 20. And then on the bottom we have 2 times 1, 2. And then last thing we have to do is the inside here. So this is -2 plus or minus the square root of 24 over 2. And then we always want to check and see if we can simplify this, because now we know how to simplify radicals. Yes, we have to.
Before we didn't have to.
Before we didn't have to, but now you do, because now you know how to simplify radicals. So for the quiz, you didn't have to simplify this, but now you do. So I have the square root. Yes, you have to do this for the test tomorrow. So what are 2 factors of 24? 12 and 2. What are 2 factors of 12? 6 and 2. And 2 factors of 6? 3 and 2. And 2 and 2. So what am I going to circle? 2's. So what comes to the outside?
2.
And what stays on the inside? 6. So 3 times 2, which is 6. So all I'm doing is replacing this with the simplified version. So my answer is -2 plus or minus 2 square root 6 divided by 2. That's our answer. All right, let's take a look at number 4. So it's equal to 0, so I can just list my a, b, and c. What's a?
1.
A is 1. What's b? -3. And what's c? 2. Perfect. So now I plug it in. So I have -b, so -3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -3 squared, minus 4 times a times c, over 2a. So what should I do first to simplify? It becomes a +3, plus or minus. Awesome. -3 squared is 9, because it's -3 times -3, so it's a positive 9. And then what's -4 times 1? And -4 times 2? -8. Over 2 times 1, which is 2. So then simplifying this part on the inside, I have 3 plus or minus the square root of, what's 9 minus 8? 1. over 2. And what's the square root of 1? 1. So this is 3 plus or minus 1 over 2. And we can leave it like this. So all you have to do is simplify the radical. Let's do the discriminant. What's our discriminant formula? B squared minus 4ac. And remember, it has to be equal to 0, and everything has to be in order. So for number 6, it's not equal to 0, so how do I get it to be equal to 0? Okay, I can do that. I'll add 4.
Oh, wait, I mean, move the 6 over.
It doesn't matter, we'll get the same answer. It's a little bit more work, but it's fine. If you move the negative 6a squared to the other side, that's okay. But remember, since this is a minus 4 here, to move it to the other side, you have to add 4. And since it's a plus a, to move it to the other side, you have to minus a. Yeah. How would I rewrite the left side? What order do I have to write it in? Perfect. Negative 6a squared minus a plus 4. It has to be in order with your squared term, then your variable by itself, then the number. When Madison comes back. So what's a after? So a is negative 6. What's b? Negative 1. And what's c? So let's plug it in. We have b squared, so negative 1 squared minus 4 times negative 6 times 4. So what's negative 1 squared? 1. And then I'm going to multiply all of these together next. So what's negative 4 times 6? 24. And 24 times 4? 96. So 1, is it plus 96 or minus? Plus 96. What's 1 plus 96? 97. So our discriminant is 97. How many solutions do we have? 2 real solutions. So don't forget, for these questions, you have to find the discriminant, so you have to find this number and state the number of real solutions. Some people on the quiz only put 1 and just said real solution, but they didn't put the number. So you have to find the discriminant and the number of solutions. As a reminder, I have it on the next page. So 7 is already equal to 0, so we can just go ahead and list our A, B, and C. We don't have to move anything around first. So what's A? A is 3. What's B? And what's C? Awesome. So let's plug it in. Our formula is b squared minus 4ac. So b squared would be 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times 3. What's 6 squared? 36. What is negative 4 times 3? Negative 12. And negative 12 times 3? Negative 36. So it's 36 minus 36. 0. How many solutions do we have if our answer is 0? 1 real solution. So as a little reminder, I'll write it up here. If your answer is positive, that means we have 2 real solutions. If our answer is negative, that means we have no real solutions. And then if our answer is 0, then we have 1 real solution. So not only do you have to remember your discriminant formula, but you also have to remember this to state the number of solutions. Let's take a look at number 9. So we're simplifying our radicals here. What should I do first? Take the negative out and change it to an I. What are 2 factors of 90? 9 and 10. What are 2 factors of 9? 3 and 3. 2 factors of 10? 2 and 5. And can we break anything else down? Nope. So what do we circle? The 3's. So what comes outside? 3? Well, it's already on the outside. So 3i. What stays on the inside? Perfect. 2 times 5, which would be 10. Awesome. So 11, people are kind of confused because they're like, what do we do when there's no negative? You do the same thing, you're just not taking out an I here. So what are factors of 75? 15 and 3. You could also say 5, or it should be 15 and 5, right? 15 and 5. Or 25 and 3. It doesn't matter which factors you use, just as long as they're the right ones, you'll end up with the same answer. So what are 2 factors of 15? 5 and 3. So do I have any pairs?
5.
Pair of 5s. So take out the 5. What stays on the inside?
5.
What stays on the inside?
I mean 3.
3. So it'll be 5 square root 3. So for 13, I'm subtracting. So what do I need to do first?
Negative, distribute to 3 and 2i.
I have to distribute the negative to what's in the parentheses behind it. So it only goes to the 3 and the 2i. It's not going to go to that 5 because it's outside the parentheses. So it only gets distributed to what's in the parentheses right behind it. Everything else stays the same. So it's negative 8i. What happens when I distribute the negative to negative 3? It becomes a positive 3. And then what does the negative 2i turn into? A positive 2i. And then minus 5. So what are my real numbers here? So what's 3 minus 5? Negative 2. What are my imaginary numbers? What's negative 8i plus 2i? Negative 6i. And that's our answer. So remember, we are combining like terms. The real number has to go first, then the imaginary one second. All right, 15. All right, so 14, we're adding. So what can I do with the parentheses when we're adding? We just get rid of them. We don't need them. So what are my real numbers? What's 1 minus 1? 0. And then what are my imaginary numbers? So it's I plus 2i. 3i. You don't need to keep the 0, so it would just be 3i as our answer. Here. So if it's positive, we have 2 real solutions. If it's negative, we have no real solutions. And if it's 0, we have 1 real solution. So make sure you know these for the test tomorrow. All right, let's do number 8. Do we have to move anything around first? Nope, because it's equal to 0, so we can just list A, B, and C. So what's A? A is negative 1. What's B? 5. And what's C? 6. So B squared minus 4AC. So it'll be 5 squared minus 4 times, what's A? Negative 1. And what's C? 6. What is 5 squared? 25. Then we have to multiply all of these together first because we have to follow PEMDAS. What's negative 4 times negative 1? 4. And 4 times 6? 24. So 25 minus 24 is what? Oh, is it minus or plus here? It should be plus. It's positive 24. So 25 plus 24. 49. So if it's a positive number, how many solutions do we have? 2 real solutions. All right, next we are simplifying. So what do I have to do first when I have a negative under the square root? Make it an I. So we put it outside and it becomes an I. What are 2 factors of 216?
108 and 2.
All right.
182.
We can do 108 and 2.
And then 12.
108 is 12 and 9. What are two factors of 12, Maya? 3 and 4. And two factors of 9? 3 and 3. 3 is prime, so we just bring it down. What are two factors of 4? And then 3 and 3 and 2. So what am I going to circle here? So what goes on the outside?
Yeah, so cute.
What goes on the outside?
6i.
So 2 times 3i, and what stays on the inside? 3 times 2. So it'll be 6i square root 6. So you had 108 and 2, and then 108 was, you said 54 and 2. And then 54 is what? 9 and 6. And then 9. 3 and 3 and 6. 3 and 2. So what do we circle? 2 3s and 2 2s. So be careful with your work here, guys. The most common mistake is like forgetting to bring something down or just...
Yeah, I forgot to bring that.
Yeah, happens. So if you do it right, it doesn't matter what factors you do, you'll end up with the same answer, but only if you do it right. Any questions on that one? All right, let's look at 12. So I have negative 192. What are two factors of 192? 32 and 6? Is that what you said? That works. What are two factors of 32? 8 and 4. And two factors of 6? 3 and 2. Two factors of 8? And two factors of 4? Alright, so we have 2. This is 2 and 2. 3, 2. What do I circle? 2s, 2s, and then I have another pair of 2s here. Even though they're not right next to each other, I can still circle them because it's still a pair. So how many 2s come to the outside? 3. So 2 times 2 times 2. What else comes to the outside that I forgot to do in the beginning? The I. And what stays on the inside? 3, because it doesn't have a pair. And then if I have more than one thing that I took to the outside, what do I have to do to them? Multiply. So it's 2 times 2 times 2. 8i square root 3. So if we already had a number outside, we keep it outside and just multiply whatever else we take out. So this would be, if it was 2 square root 75, it would be 10 square root 3. Because you just keep the number outside and multiply it. Let's say this was negative 2. Then our answer would just be negative 10. So you just keep the negative outside too. All right, so I'm adding. What should I do first?
Take away the parentheses.
Perfect. If we're adding, we don't need the parentheses. So I just add what first? Like terms. The real numbers or imaginary numbers first? Real numbers first, because you have to put the real numbers first in your answer. So I have 1 minus 1, which is 0. And then the imaginary numbers, so what's I plus 2i?
3i.
3i, because this is like 1i and 1 plus 3 would be 3i.
You have to put the 0 there.
Right, we don't put the 0, so it would just be 3i. 3 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, just for fun. We don't need it.
Hypothetically speaking, if you wanted to.
No,
How come in your decimal you can put 0, 0, as many zeros as you want?
because in a decimal, like it doesn't change the number.
It doesn't change the answer.
Well, if it says simplify, you gotta simplify, so then you wouldn't need the 0.
Oh, I don't get this.
You don't put the 0. All right. So 15 again, I'm subtracting. What do I need to do here? What should I do first? I'm not foiling when I subtract I just distribute the minus. So it'll be negative 3 plus 5i minus 5. And then what is this? What comes next?
Plus 6i.
Plus 6i. What are my real numbers? Negative 3 and negative 5. So what's negative 3 minus 5? Negative 8. What are my imaginary numbers?
Positive 5i plus 6i.
Positive 5i plus 6i. What do we get when we add those? So plus 11i. So that's our answer. So be careful when you are adding or subtracting, you're not FOILing. You only FOIL when you multiply. But here we have to distribute the negative because we have parentheses behind it. All right, so last part, we're multiplying complex numbers. So only when multiplying, we'll end up with an I squared. But remember, what's I squared equal to? Negative 1. So we will never have I squared in our answer because we always change it to negative 1. For 17, how do I do 1 minus 5i squared? How do I square it? What should I do first? Perfect. So I just rewrite it because I'm going to have to FOIL. So it's 1 minus 5i times 1 minus 5i. You can't distribute the squared. It doesn't work that way. It's 1 minus 5i times 1 minus 5i. Now what do I have to do? How do I multiply these? What's it called? FOIL. I have to FOIL. So multiply the first. 1 times 1, which is 1. Yeah. What are the outsides? What's 1 times negative 5i? Perfect. Negative 5i. What are the insides? So it's negative 5i times 1. Negative 5i. And then what are the lasts? So it'll be negative 5i times negative 5i. And it'll be plus 25, what? I squared, because it's an I times an I. What does our I squared turn into? I squared turns into negative 1, so it becomes a negative 25. So always get rid of the I squared and change the sign of that number that it's touching. What are our real numbers now? So what's 1 minus 25? Negative 24. What are our imaginary numbers? What's negative 5i minus 5i? Negative 10i. So that's our answer. Let's do 18. So if I have 2 terms times 2 terms, how do I multiply these? FOIL. So what do I multiply first? What's negative 3 times 5? Negative 15. What are the outsides? What's negative 3 times 5i? Negative 15i. What are the insides? What's 3i times 5? 15i. And what are the lasts? So 3i times 5i, which would be 15i squared, because we're multiplying 2 i's. And what does the I squared turn into? It makes it a negative 15. So it always changes the sign of that number. So what are our real numbers? Negative 15 and negative 15. So it's negative 15 minus 15. Negative 30. And then what are our imaginary numbers? So it's negative 15i plus 15i. 0. So if we get 0i, do I need to write it? Nope. So it's just negative 30 as our answer. 16. So 16, we're still adding. What should I do? Take away the parentheses. So what are my real numbers here? What's negative 7 minus 2? Negative 9. And what are my imaginary numbers? What's 4i plus 8i? 12i. That's my answer. Remember, real number first, then the imaginary. All right, let's do a subtracting one like 15. All right, so when we're subtracting, what do I have to do first? Distribute the negative, and I just distribute it to the parentheses behind. So if I had like a plus 4 out here, would the negative get distributed to that 4? No, because it's not in the parentheses behind it. Yes. Yes. So distribute the negative. We have negative 3 plus 5i minus 5. What happens to the 6i? It becomes positive. So a negative times a negative becomes positive, so 6 plus 6i. What are my real numbers? What's negative 3 minus 5? Negative 8. What are my imaginary numbers? 5i and 6i, so it's 5i plus 6i, 11i. All right, let's do, I did 18 already, so let me erase it. All right, multiplying. When I have two terms times two terms, how do I multiply them? I have to FOIL. So what are the first ones that I multiply here? Negative 3 times 5. So it's negative 3 times 5. Negative 15. What are the outsides? What's negative 3 times 5i? Negative 15i. What are the insides? What's 3i times 5? 15i. And then what are the last? Perfect. 3i times 5i is 15i squared. What should I do next? Perfect. I change the I squared to be negative 1, so that makes this a negative 15. So we just change the sign of whatever the I squared is touching. The I squared goes away. So your answer will never have an I squared in it because you change it to negative 1. So what's negative 15 minus 15? Our real numbers here. Negative 30. And what is negative 15i plus 15i?
0.
Do I need to write 0i? No. So my answer is just negative 30. All right, what do I have to do here for number 20? FOIL. So what do I multiply first? The first ones, which are what? First. What's negative 1 times 4? Negative 4. What are the outsides? What's negative 1 times negative 5i? 5i. What are the insides? What's negative I times 4? Negative 4i. And what are the lasts? What's negative I times negative 5i? Positive 5i squared. Because a negative times a negative is a positive, and I times I is I squared. What do I do with the I squared? Make it a negative 5. So I change the sign. Now what are my real numbers? What's negative 4 minus 5? Negative 9. What are my imaginary numbers? What's 5i minus 4i? Positive I. So 19 looks a little bit different because it's two terms that are squared. So what do I do here? I rewrite it. So it's 5 minus 2i times 5 minus 2i. So be careful. You can't just square this and square this. It does not work that way. You have to rewrite it, and then what do? FOIL. So what are the firsts? 5 times 5, which is 25. What are the outsides? What's 5 times negative 2i? Negative 10i. What are the insides? What's negative 2i times 5? Negative 10i. And what are the last? What's negative 2i times negative 2i? Is it a positive 4i squared or positive because we have a negative times a negative? And the I squared turns it into a negative 4. Nick, what are my real numbers? So what's 25 minus 4? 21. Paula, what are my imaginary numbers? So it's negative 10i minus 10i. Negative 20i. And that's my answer. You cannot combine these together because they are not like terms. The real number always, always, always goes first. If you put the real number second, it'll be wrong. Real number first.